Fire Emblem is full of choices. Every decision you make on the battlefield could mean the difference between a successful encounter or a painful death. The simple yet intuitive strategic design of Fire Emblem has attracted millions for the past 30 years. It is safe to say that your choices matter on the field. Yet, how do your choices matter off the battlefield? Should we, the player, have an impact on the plot, or are we just along for the ride? Before we can answer this question, we need to analyze how player decisions have been handled throughout the Fire Emblem series. From FE1 up to New Mystery of the Emblem, the players had very little say in the characters, narrative, or plot. However, when the character was presented with a decision, the game often accommodated the player. Some key examples of these are the route split in Sacred Stones and Peleus' sacrifice. These choices are presented to the player and have a direct impact on the narrative as well as the gameplay. Oftentimes, these choices are meant to break the fourth wall, as the game acknowledges that you, the player, are making choices on the behalf of established, predefined characters. These opportunities were scarce, so it was generally accepted that if the game asked for your input, your answer would affect your experience in some way. Then came Awakening. Everything was fine until we were presented with the option to sacrifice or save Emmeryn. We made our choice, only to find out that it didn't matter. Emmeryn sacrificed herself either way. Our decision was ignored. This happened again when Lucina levied judgment upon Robin and asked to take their life. We were presented with an option to yield or deny, and again, our decision was ignored. We had been betrayed not once, but twice. Finally, Grima asks us to submit to their power. At this point, we know better. Our decisions do not matter. You most likely picked an answer without thinking, knowing full well that either option would lead to the same outcome. For years, people have said that Awakening's decision mechanic falls flat because your choices do not matter. Why present an option if it will have no impact on the game? And for a while, I agreed with this. However, one game came along and proved that this was in fact not the issue, but rather something deeper. This game was Three Houses. As you may know, Three Houses is littered with so-called player choices. The game presents the player with standard dialogue options to supplement Byleth's discussion with other characters. And for the most part, your dialogue choices do not affect the overall narrative or gameplay. At most, you gain or lose a few support points. So, why does Three Houses' choice system seem to work while Awakening's does not? When you start a new game on Three Houses, the game immediately prompts you with a question from Sothis. Who are you, anyway? We are given three options, and we quickly find out that if we do not pick the right one, our choice is rejected. Right from the get-go, the game sets the expectation that our dialogue options in Three Houses will not affect the overall narrative or gameplay. Instead, it presents the options simply as a mechanism to communicate through a silent protagonist like Byleth. Now, I know that many people do not like the silent protagonist and its dialogue options, and that's fine. Although, regardless of your opinion on the mechanic, the game does a fine job establishing the player's expectation for Byleth's dialogue options. It is clear that our choices have little impact, therefore we do not assign value to the options we choose and don't feel betrayed. This is where Awakening went wrong. The game has not established an expectation for player choices, so we justifiably assumed that they would matter. All the player choices in past games had changed the outcome of the story. Combine this with the choice being asked at a very contentious point in the plot where a route or narrative shift would likely happen, and it makes perfect sense why we expected our input to matter. It makes even more sense why we felt so angry when our option was ignored. Our expectation was subverted. This is why Awakening's lack of player responsiveness stings so much, because it displayed the facade that our choices mattered. Three Houses learned from this and made it clear when our choices mattered. Displaying a special dialogue box and printing in big red letters, this decision will drastically change the story. It set the expectation so we did not have to decide for ourselves and risk feeling cheated. My hope is that future Fire Emblem games will continue to set clear expectations for player choices and not leave it ambiguous. Whether or not they matter, we the player should clearly know what to expect. Furthermore, it should be clear why our choices do or do not matter. For example, I can understand why the Three Houses dialogue does not always have a direct impact on the story because it's a necessary function to facilitate dialogue with the silent protagonist. Whether or not it's a good mechanic and could be executed differently is an entirely different discussion. But within the context of Three Houses, its existence makes sense. As for Awakening, the denial of our choices makes little sense. I've heard people say that our choices having little impact is a result of the larger narrative that fate is inevitable and that sometimes we are powerless. However, I don't buy this. Why would the developers gamble our expectation of choice for the small chance that we relate it to the game's narrative? It doesn't seem to pay off. At the end of the day, all that matters is that our expectation of choice is not betrayed. You either set the expectation or risk playing with fire. The choice is yours. I'm Aldwin, and I'm out.